David. Welcome to the show. I have David Suich here. Very excited to learn about all of your experiences and the information you have to share with us. So if you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your experience doing research with near-death experiences, that would be great.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Liz. It's a pleasure to be here on Unleashing Light. I got into near-death experiences because I had some chronic pain. It started in 1999, and by a few years later, I had to have surgery. It got worse and worse, and by 2007, it was making it difficult to work. I became very depressed, and YouTube was pretty new back then in 2007. And I clicked on a random video in my feed about near-death experiences, and that got me started on well, it's been 16 years now. I've probably heard around 1,200 near-death experiences and wrote a book about it. And I'm a counselor now for people who have near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences or spiritual awakenings. So it's been quite a wonderful journey. And all the beautiful testimonies these people have freely shared with me have changed my life. And it's been for the better. And I really would have been lost without them. I kind of look at them like they've saved my life.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the work that you do. So I kind of want to get started off at the very beginning with maybe talking a little bit about the soul birth plan and just kind of just describing what you know that to be and any experiences you've had with people that have shared that with you. That would be great.
Okay, so just as a human being enjoys experiencing a different reality by watching a really good movie or reading a great book, maybe a true story, maybe fantasy, we like to experience these different realities. Souls like to leave the comfort and joy and perfect love of heaven to come down and have a physical incarnation, a human experience for the purposes of learning, growth, and of course, enjoyment. We're supposed to have fun down here. It's one of the things that we're supposed to do. So there is a process of planning this, just like when you plan a vacation, you write out an itinerary and you decide where you're going to go and sort of the major things that you're going to do, and then you fill in the details. And it's very similar. So you sit down generally with your soul group, and these are people that you incarnate in various roles with over the eons. And you kind of pick your parents, you pick where you're going to be born, your major life events, your challenges, and that kind of thing. And there's some elders often that are there. Now, there's no age in heaven. There's no time in heaven, but let's just say more experienced souls or more experienced spirits. And they will generally keep the individual from taking on too many challenges. The way it works is the soul is really excited. I'm going to have this earthly life, and okay, I want to take on an abusive boss, and I want to take on a difficult spouse, and I want to take on a problem child, and the elders have to say, okay, well, let's not take on too many challenges. So they help us strike a balance between having enough challenges that we'll learn and grow and strengthen, but not so many that we'll fail. And so we're never given challenges we're incapable of overcoming. So from an earthly perspective, there are certainly victims. Somebody does something horrible to you and you're a victim. But from the soul perspective, there are no victims. We're aware of all the potentials. We often choose some of the major events in our lives, whether it's a difficult spouse or a difficult boss or a physical disability or, mental issues or emotional issues, any major defect that a human being has, those are generally chosen in the pre-soul planning. And so we have many lifetimes. The average human being, if you add up all their lifetimes on this planet and on other planets, is probably over 1 million years old.
Okay. And so how do you explain to somebody who, Earthside, that doesn't remember, obviously, this birth planning? They're like, David, I would never choose this. I would never choose an abusive relationship or losing my child. And, and the response is like, well, no, really, like, you chose this. But how do you help them to understand that? And what ways have people who do remember pieces of their pre-birth plan, how have they been able to access that?
Well, I don't know of too many people who remember pre-birth planning. Most of them are either shown in their near-death experience. Some past life regression therapists are able to access that.
Mhm.
But how to deal with it? Well, yeah, I mean, I've done probably, I don't know, 50 or so guest appearances on various channels, and people get very angry when we mention, you choose the major events and the challenges. They get very upset. I would never choose this. This has been a horrible nightmare. Well, you do. And the only thing I can say to comfort the person is the reason we do this is for growth. So there are two ways to do things. You can do things slowly over time, or you can do it quickly, and that generally involves more suffering. And so a good analogy I like to use is if I had to go from where I am now to a mile away, I can take a nice leisurely walk and it's going to be very comfortable, but it's going to take me 25 minutes. Or I can run as fast as I can, and I might get there in 8 minutes, but my legs are going to hurt. I'm going to be sweating, out of breath, and tired. And so there's suffering involved. And whenever you want to have great leaps and bounds, there's going to be suffering. It's going to be more chaotic. I mean, just like if I said, you got 3 years to build a house, that wouldn't be stressful. If I said you got 3 weeks, well, it's going to be stressful. And the only thing I can say to comfort these people is a concept that really shocked me when I started hearing this. And that is, for the love of heaven to exist. Near-death experiencers talk about this incredible, indescribable love and peace and joy and beauty of heaven, and even other worlds in our galaxy. Even for those to exist, there always has to be a small part of creation that is experiencing the opposite, that has this love-fear duality. So we have this love-fear duality on planet Earth, and we have the choice to choose between love and fear. So I can be kind to a person, I can be cruel. And you can't do that on the other side of the veil because you're all connected. You feel what they feel. So if you're cruel to somebody, you feel it. So that doesn't happen. Fear doesn't exist over there. It's all love. It's based on love. But for that love to continue, for that bubble of heaven to exist, somebody's got to do the dirty work. And that's why we are considered brave souls by those on the other side of the veil. We are considered like the daredevil souls. Oh, you go down to earth. You don't feel the love anymore. You don't even remember your home. And you're in these frail bodies and you're afraid to die. And you get hurt and you struggle to survive and you go through all this horrible stuff. And the reason we do it is because we love our heavenly family. And we're the ones doing the hard work that is a critical part of the engine of growth of creation. So we're doing a really tough job down here. And we're the ones that are qualified to do it. Not all souls are qualified to come down here. Some near-death experiences were told, oh, you human beings do things their angels wouldn't dare do. We're considered the crazy souls that are doing all the tough work. So it's important. It's important what we're doing. It's critical for the creation process.
And what has been the most shocking thing or eye-opening thing that you learned, maybe even early on in this process of going, oh my gosh, I didn't understand that's how the world worked, or just an aha moment that you had?
Oh, wow. There were so many. Probably the first jaw-dropping thing is, it was the very first testimony I heard, where the guy was only dead for about a minute, but there's no time in heaven. And he asked several thousand questions before they sent him back. And one of the questions, which is a pretty common question that people ask, is, are we alone in the universe? Well, no, the universe is full of life. And there are countless other dimensions containing their own universes that are also full of life. That blew me away. Another thing that was shocking was that I had done this before. I was taught in religion. I grew up Catholic and then later Christian. I was taught, a person is born and a new soul is created. And is no, we're little facets of God and we have always existed and we always will. And that was a shocker. And then things like, you're loved no matter what you do. Because religion taught me it's a test. It's a pass-fail test. If I'm a good boy, I'll get to go to heaven when I die. And if I didn't follow the rules properly, or I picked the wrong religion, I'm going to get burned in hell for all of eternity. And, wait a minute, I'm loved no matter what I do. Yes. There's no conditions, no matter how badly I behave, no matter how much I screw up, I am loved. Yes. I mean, that was a shocker. And just the intensity of the love that I hear from these near-death experiences, they talk about it when they're in that presence of the being of light that we call God, or even just angelic beings, or
Hmm.
relatives that died before them. The love they emanate is so strong that even the word love is completely inadequate. And of course, they get frustrated trying to describe it. They talk about it like it's the best thing that's
Yeah.
ever happened to them. It's the all, it's the everything of life is to experience that love. And they get to it and they just can't describe it. And some of them cry, when they think about it. But, the things I've heard, like imagine the 100 happiest moments of your life, put them all into one moment. You don't come close. Or one guy said, take the strongest love you've ever felt, and multiply it by about 500 or 1,000. And that's about what it's like. And then there was one person who said, if you had a magic lamp with a genie, and
Hmm.
instead of 3 wishes, you had unlimited wishes your whole life. You could wish for anything a human being could have here on earth, fame, good looks, fortune, a beautiful family, a great fulfilling career, work with charity, all these wonderful things. And you have this, genie where you can wish for anything. Your life wouldn't be nearly as good. You wouldn't have nearly the joy that you would have in heaven. So just what an amazing place it is compared to down here was shocking. And it doesn't end with the things that I've been shocked with. We create our own reality. That was another big one. Wait a minute, really? Whatever I focus my thoughts and words are on, that tends to create my reality. Yes. I very early on, I heard NDEs come back and say, well, had I known how powerful my thoughts and words are, when I learned up there in heaven, I'd have been much more careful. Things like that. Or, I had no idea how my behavior was affecting other people. So it changed almost every aspect of my life because of these shocking things that I've learned. And I still, to this day, will learn new shocking things that I hadn't heard before after, 16 years of doing this. So
Yeah.
I'm
So
sure I've got more surprises coming.
I bet you do. So have you, when people say, oh, had I have known, I would have been behaving so differently. Have you had the experience of meeting with people who had NDEs that were doing really brutalizing things to other people, or, abusing others, or, whatever? Have you had that chance to meet with somebody who's just been kind of wreaking havoc on other lives?
Oh, sure. There was one man who he was a sharpshooter in
Mm.
the, in the army. And I think it was in the Vietnam War. He got sent with a few of his friends, and they were supposed to assassinate this North Vietnamese officer. And so they kind of hid out there in the jungle, and there was this building with, I don't know, 50 officials, North Korean army, and they couldn't get a clear shot. So after 3 days or so, they decided to detonate the whole building. Yeah. And they blew it up, and they're laughing about it. We got them. Well, in the life review, you become every person you've ever interacted with, and then you experience it from their perspective as if you were them. So, he experienced every mother that gets to knock on the door. Oh, I'm sorry. Your husband has been killed in the war, and how it affects the children's lives and all that. And I mean, it can be really tough for some people. The very first NDE I ever heard, he was one of these guys that, there's almost one in every big group or organization,
Mhm.
government organization or company, or even churches, some guy that, or some woman that's, you know, intimidating, yelling, always creating drama. He was one of these guys that just, always yelled at others, intimidated others. He just was a big bully, and he had a really hard time in his life review. I mean, he had to stop, and they would shine emotions of love and acceptance so he could continue the review. So some people have a really tough time, but the opposite is true as well. People do things that they think nothing of. Somebody walking down the street and, you know, eating a Subway sandwich, and a homeless guy says, "Oh, do you have any money for food?" And hands them the half-eating sandwich.
Mhm.
Like, "Here you go. You can have the rest of my sandwich." And it's kind of like, that wasn't much. And in heaven, they experience it from the homeless man's perspective, who hasn't eaten in 2 days and is just overjoyed to have something to eat, and it tastes so good. Or, you help somebody out and you have no idea, how much you helped him. The man who was a sharpshooter, he had a second near-death experience. Of course, after his first near-death experience, he changed completely. And he worked in hospice, caring for these elderly people at end of life. And his second near-death experience, he said when he went through that part of his life review, where he was helping these elderly people and being nice to them and talking to them and trying to comfort them and be their friend, he said it was like emotional fireworks. So yeah, it can be rough for some people, but for other people who've spent a lot of time serving humanity or have been particularly kind to their fellow human being, it can be a wonderful experience.
And so for somebody that is, like him in a position as a sharpshooter or just, an angry person, is that part of, or, somebody who's, committed crimes or things like that, is that part of their pre-birth soul plan to begin with, that they're going to come here and wreak havoc?
Probably. Yeah, not always. So for instance, I heard Hitler did not plan in his life planning to start World War II. But often it's part of the plan. So I've heard things like, soul group is planning lives, and they say, okay, well, I want to experience what it's like to have an abusive spouse. And of course, the other souls, they're like your best friends up there. You really love them. And so they don't want to take on the role of being the abuser, but they do it to have the experience. And so that you can have the experience like, oh, okay, well, I'll be your abusive spouse. And they take those roles on. So yeah, I've heard about that in the pre-life planning.
Okay, so if that's part of the pre-birth plan, but then when we go for the life review, do we then still feel the pain that we caused, given that God or universe or source agreed to that? We still feel the pain that we caused, even though it was the contract.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. When a scientist does an experiment and it fails, he wants to know all the reasons. And when it succeeds, he wants to know the reasons it succeeds. So sure, you experience what it was like to be a bully or an evil person, and then you experience all the other people around you and how it affected them. And whenever you experience the opposite of what you want, it strengthens what you want.
So interesting. Okay. And so obviously we know you believe in heaven, but do you believe in hell? And what do you say to people that are convinced one way or the other?
Well, I probably couldn't say that I believe in the terms of heaven and hell in the common way they're understood in our society.
Okay.
From my perspective, there really is only a different level of reality, the afterlife, and there are countless numbers of realms ranging in vibration and densities. And the high density, lower vibration ones you might consider hell, and the more pleasant ones, high vibration, you might consider heaven. And the vast majority of the realms are very high vibration, but there are a number of reasons the soul may choose to disconnect themselves partially or completely from the divine creative source, which creates sort of a hellish environment. So it's not a punishment. It's not a sentence. We have this idea that's a human concept, which is, if you do something bad, there's got to be punishment. Well, that's basically revenge. The creative benevolent source of everything that exists that we call God does not have the mind of a human being. It is pure light, love, and compassion. It doesn't have anger, judgment, expectation. It only loves.
Okay. And so I know you're talking about different levels. Do we also have different soul levels? I know there's, an old soul and a young soul, but is there levels of souls as well?
Well, I say levels because human beings compartmentalize things. So like in my book, I talk about the first level of heaven that can sort of be described in human words. The higher levels can't. But that would be like saying, okay, I'm going to walk into the ocean. And when I'm 1 foot deep, I'm at the first level of the ocean. And when I get to 2 feet deep, I'm at the second level. Well, there's really no such thing. And so it's the same with souls. Are there levels of education? Well, there is. Yeah. but there's just on Earth, there's a great variety of human beings with different levels of education and experience, and it's the same in heaven. There's souls that don't have as much experience at this or that, and there's ones that are extremely experienced, and the very advanced souls have come down to help us, masters of the planet, Buddha, Jesus, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, all these masters that come down, and so they've had a lot of experience. And when you get a lot of experience, then you become a leader and a helper. So it's just like down here on Earth. You have your time of being a child, and then when you grow up, you're being the parent for the child, and you're guiding them. It's just the same deal. So there's a great variety of souls and spirits and angels and beings in heaven.
And so is there ever a point that you reach where you don't need to reincarnate again? Or do you just,
Sure.
okay. And so what is like the bridge to that? Like what happens that allows you to be kind of done?
Well, you just learn and develop all you can from that type of activity. So it's just like when I was a child, 5 years old, and I learned how to ride a bicycle. I had to put training wheels on at first. I couldn't have done it without the training wheels. But if I leave the training wheels on too long, it's going to hinder me. So there's a time where, I'm done with this. And it's the same with physical lifetimes. Comes a time when you've experienced and learned that all you can with that. And so then you take on some different roles and continue to learn and grow. And that was one of the, talking about shockers earlier, that was one of the shockers. I thought, well, someday you get to the top. No, the learning and growth never stops.
Okay.
Even God grows.
And so is there ever a point where we will reach heaven on earth, or is that just kind of a saying that we use down here?
Well, yes, but it's not going to be like the bliss of heaven. But compared to today's culture and society, worldwide culture, society, it's going to be like heaven on earth. So we are at a development stage where we're like the 2-year-old who's just learning not to fight the other 2-year-olds in the sandbox. We still have war going on, which is extremely barbaric. We haven't even gotten peace on earth, which is going to be the first step. And once the civilization stops fighting each other and learns to live with each other in cooperation and learns to live with nature, they advance both spiritually and technologically and the way I understand it, and there's no set timeline because we have free will, so this can change, but we're probably going to have about another 50 years where there's going to be some wars and chaos and drama and that kind of thing. And about 50 years from now, from what I understand, is going to be the first sort of steps towards peace on earth, no more war. And then things will really get moving. And in about 150 years, we're going to be living in this peaceful utopian society where the structure of leadership that we have now, one guy at the top of the pyramid and then, the next level and that kind of thing, that's going to be gone. It's going to be ruled by the community. We'll have some very advanced technology, but it's going to be limited use because we're going to discover biology is the best technology. We're going to live in these small communities of around 100 to 150 people. And they're going to be sort of like garden paradises. The entire worldwide culture will be focused on teaching children about God, love, nature, science, that kind of thing. And of course, we'll have relationships with intelligent beings on other planets. We'll be able to communicate with each other telepathically, no more cell phone. Yeah. Imagine a day where you say, hey, I wonder if Jim and Susan want to come over for dinner. And you go, okay, let me check. Yeah, they said they're coming. That's where we're moving.
And so
of course, we're going to clean the earth up as well. We'll get the environment cleaned up.
I hope so. And so has all of this information come to you from people who have had the near-death experiences, or are there other sources that you're gaining this knowledge from?
That's a good question. Most of the information I have comes from near-death experience testimonies. Some comes from channelers of various kinds. There's Pleiadian channelers and Nocturian channelers and, Syrians and all sorts of other races that communicate with human beings down here. And some of it comes from, great teachers here. I like Matt Kahn, Teal Swan, Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts. And
there are some great teachers. For
Yeah.
sure.
So some of it comes from them. And then, of course, some comes from my own downloads. So I have communication with some spirit guides. I'm not super clairvoyant. I'm not a medium or anything like that, but I do get some pretty clear communications, and I'll ask questions and get answers. And, then I'll kind of investigate the answer, make sure I'm not getting my wires crossed. And that's, yeah, the bulk of where my information comes from, those sources.
Okay. And so what do you say to the people who have NDEs and they're just too afraid to share their story or to get into counseling? What advice do you have for them? Because I hear from so many just saying that they're just holding it in for so long and they don't want to talk about it and it scares them. So what words of encouragement do you have for them?
Well, yeah, sure, certainly that's okay. If a person's not comfortable talking about it, they shouldn't talk about it if they don't feel comfortable, because there is judgment. Even doing what I do, it's something that I like to keep sort of private, even though I don't know, a couple million people have probably heard me speak. Um, I I kind of try and keep that out of my conversations with most of my friends and family,
Yeah.
because there's this progression, right? They think, okay, you're crazy. And then because you're crazy, you might be dangerous and I need to get away from you. Right. So kind of can cause us to be isolated. So I would say, yeah, don't talk to anybody about it. If you don't want to talk to anybody about it, keep quiet about it. Now, my advice is, you were up there, you stand in front of that light and love
Mhm.
of heaven, and it changes you forever. You cannot be changed, after that experience. Even if a person has a very brief experience in
Mhm.
heaven, it changes you forever to experience that endless, boundless, indescribable, unconditional love. And so take what you learned and share it, because if I go around trying to share with just your average person, my spiritual beliefs, most of them are going to reject it and tell me that I'm crazy. Certainly in a forum like this, these are people that want to hear the message. So I'm open to talk here. But my personal philosophy is, you take the love and the kindness and the compassion and the
Mhm.
forgiveness and the self-control and all the positive attributes that you get from a near-death experience, or from studying NDEs, or just from having your own spiritual awakening, and then go out and be kind and loving to your fellow man. Everybody accepts love and kindness. They don't accept the concepts behind it, maybe, but they all accept, everybody wants to be treated with love and kindness and respect.
Yeah. Okay. And so um I guess with the near death experiences, are there any pieces that are still confusing to you, or you're still looking into searching more information on? Where is your direction of learning, I guess, going with it at this point?
Well, I do occasionally learn some new things or little details, but most near-death experiences I hear, it's kind of old information. Um, I guess, I mean, if I was, had one question to ask heaven, I would say, what's the deal with the negative experiences? Because maybe 3% or so were negative experiences. And I know there's a point to experiencing disconnection from source, but I don't understand it completely. So I'd want a better description of why hellish experiences, or even just suffering here on earth. I have some ideas about it, and I hear from the NDEs some of the reasons, but I don't understand it as fully as I'd like.
Yeah, can you explain just a little bit of what you have heard? Because I do know a couple people that have had those negative experiences, which is the whole reason they won't speak about it, as opposed to just, somebody who had a good experience and is worried they're going to be crazy. I'm just worried if you can vocalize a little bit of what you've heard about the negative ones.
Well, negative experiences, I believe, happen because consciousness and the universe will give us whatever experience is necessary for the development of our souls. So Proverbs in the Bible says sometimes it takes a painful experience to make us change our ways.
Mhm.
So a good analogy would be when you have a small child and you've got to teach him not to touch the hot stove.
Mhm.
So you can do it slowly over time. Every time he goes to, reach towards the stove when it's on, you say, don't touch that. That's hot. And he may eventually learn. But what if he doesn't? Well, you can teach him through pain and suffering in an instant. You let him touch the hot stove one time. He's never going to touch it again. And that child that touches the hot stove one time is going to be much more careful about avoiding it than the child who just learned by being told. So when we have these negative experiences where we disconnect from source or just a difficult experience on earth, when you are back in the love and the connection, you appreciate it that much more. You know, who appreciates a meal more? The wealthy billionaire who grew up in a household and they have 7 master chefs in the kitchen and every meal is a 5-star meal, and he really enjoys good food and goes to some of the best restaurants on earth. And this billionaire really enjoys good food. And he sits down at one of his favorite restaurants and has one of his favorite meals, top-notch quality food. Now, there's another man. He is a poor man living on the streets in a third world country. He does odd jobs to feed his family. And sometimes they go without food because there's no money for food. And here it is. It's been 2 or 3 days and his family hasn't had any food. And he's feeling horrible, like I'm not a good caretaker. And he's feeling the pains of the hunger himself, and he's weak, and he gets a little job, a little day job, and he takes home enough money to buy a small bag of rice and beans. And he is so happy, and because he's going to feed his family now. And they sit down and they have this very bland meal, and they haven't eaten in 2 or 3 days. Who enjoys the meal more?
I think the wealthy person might complain about it, quite honestly.
Yes. It is hard for that wealthy man to muster the kind of gratitude and good feelings that the poor man felt when eating that meal. And gratitude is an energy, and it is a magnet for abundance of the thing that we're grateful for. So I really do believe that pain and suffering and the illusion of disconnection has its place in the creation process. And it wouldn't exist if it didn't. There is a common phrase or idea that I hear from NDEs, which I didn't understand at first, but I'm slowly beginning to understand it more and more. And that is, there is a perfect plan, and it's working itself out in its perfection. And if pain and suffering did not have a purpose in the creation process, it would not exist in the perfect plan. And I trust that.
And do you think that, you've got these polarities of like somebody who's very wealthy and somebody who's like starving or maybe is homeless? Do typically like we come back as the opposite? Like if we were really wealthy, will we come back as a poor homeless person? Or is it just kind of whatever we decide up there?
It is whatever you decide, but most people try to get a wide variety of experiences. So they will, say, okay, this time I'm going to be a very poor person. Next time I'll be a very wealthy. Next time I'll be middle class. They want a variety of experiences. Just as if you are an engineer or a lawyer or an accountant or a teacher, and you have a wide variety of experiences in those fields, you will become a better professional.
Right.
So if you have a wide variety of experiences, you'll become a more advanced soul.
Yeah. All right. So my next question is really around the topic of intuition. I think when we're very young, fresh babies birthed into the world, we have this amazing sense of intuition, and then we lose it. But can you speak a little bit, maybe even to how you define intuition, and then what that process is like as we are born with it and then dampen it down?
Right. So when you are a child, you're the most spiritually mature you're going to be. A lot of times when young children have imaginary friends, especially under 3 years old, they have imaginary friends. They're not imaginary. They're seeing spirits and angels, and they're real. And as they get older, they drop that belief, and so they can't see them.
So the belief completely goes away?
It doesn't go away completely. But it fades, because we're told that those things aren't real. And then when you believe it's not real, that affects your perception. So when it comes to being here on earth and trying to do our best to be mature adults, it does help to try and be childlike, because they are very involved in, living in the moment, right? They're not worried about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow. And all those things, whenever you have fear coming in, it can block intuition. it can block that connection to the divine.
Mm.
And, we're not fully connected like we are in the afterlife, but a lot of people, that veil becomes a lot more see-through. And so you get, psychics and mediums and people who just know things. And everybody is psychic. Everybody has these abilities of spiritual intuition, connection to the divine. Our guides are always talking to us. We will often hear it as a thought in our heads, but everybody uses it on a daily basis. And many times they don't even realize it. So an example of this is a man who is a businessman in a big company, very important company, and works in this big office building. And he's very responsible, and everybody knows they can depend on him, and he's there when he says he's going to be there. And one day, he forgets to do the most basic thing that, entry-level employees learn how to do when they're young, which is to set your alarm and get up on time. He forgets to set his alarm and he wakes up 2 hours late and he's mad at himself. How could I be so stupid? Well, I mean, what the heck is wrong with me? And he's really upset. He's late for work and he turns on the news as he's getting ready and he hears that the office building that he was in is no more because that man worked in the Twin Towers, 9/11. It saved his life. And often we will get intuition and make decisions and we do something that we think, oh, this was stupid or this is horrible that this happened. And we have no idea the good that came out of it. Like you can get a flat tire on your way to, the airport and be real upset that now I'm going to have to rush to catch my plane. And you finally do. And you think, oh gosh, what a horrible morning this was. And you don't realize that, had you continued without the flat tire, you'd have gotten in an accident.
You were saved. It's really.
Yeah. And so the angels and guides are always doing things to help us. And near-death experiences have told us that there would be a lot more accidents and injuries and things like that if it weren't for angelic interference.
Mm-hmm. And so when you see, like, let's say you're taking a little 2-year-old out on a walk and, they're just pointing to another house in the neighborhood and they're like, Dada. And maybe that parent has lost their dad. I mean, what do you really think is going on there?
Well, kids are far more connected intuitively, and especially the children being born today, because we're in a new energy. Mm-hmm. The veil is thinner. So you have children now remembering previous lifetimes, and they're just more intuitive. They're just more connected to emotions, and they're more open and they're more loving. They haven't been tainted by the fear and the drama and the chaos of the world. Mm-hmm. If you were having a bad day and you were out in public, try walking up to a random adult and say, I'm having a bad day and I need a hug. Mm-hmm. You might get a hug, but you'd probably have to go through 5 or 10 people before you got to somebody who'd give you a hug. What if you went up to children and said that? Probably the first one would give you a hug. Yeah. They are better at unconditional love than we are. And they are better at intuition than we are. I
think the child is maybe pointing out, like, there was a dad there that I used to know, or maybe that's your dad that has already passed. And are they trying to kind of give us messages or things like that?
Sure.
Yeah, I ask because I think, we lose people on the earth plane. And, people always say, everybody talks about seeing signs or getting connections, and then they're kind of right there in front of them and they're not noticing them. So can you speak a little bit to maybe the signs that we do get, or some of the connections that, our loved ones who have passed are able, how they can communicate with us?
Okay, so loved ones will often send a sign. A white feather is a typical sign, or a butterfly or something like that, landing on you. They stay in communication with us, and they actually come down and help us in spirit form. That's one of the things they do. In terms of how do we know when it's intuition, when it's something from above, this is a tough question. Mm-hmm. A thought comes to my mind. Well, was this something from one of my spiritual guides, or is it my own brain making it up? Mm-hmm. Well, a couple of things that are telltale signs for me, at least, is that if I ask a question and I get the answer and it's something that confuses me and I have to ask for clarification, that's a sign that it's coming from outside my own brain. Or if it's something that shocks me, that's another sign. But, sometimes you just got to make your best guess. And the gauge that I use is Does it make sense? And is this in alignment with the love of creation?
Okay.
So if I get a message like, oh, you're supposed to get revenge against that guy, because he cut you off, go follow him. And when he parks, puncture his tires with a knife. That's my own brain wanting revenge.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's not a psychic vibe. So yeah, is it based on love? And it's just a matter of getting better at it. Everybody knows how to do it. It's just a matter of recognizing it. And when you recognize it, it becomes stronger. So I'm a little bit psychic. I'm not real psychic. I've got some friends that are, much better psychics than me. But we're given the amount that we're comfortable with and the amount that we need. So some people aren't comfortable with psychic vibes, and it's not all pleasant.
Yeah.
To have this communication and really understand everything that's going on. Like I live out on top of a mountain in the middle of the woods in East Texas. And so we have an outdoor shower, and I rarely shower indoors. I just like being in the outdoors. Nobody to see me. So what the heck?
Yeah.
And we've got wasp. And for some reason, like when I'm in the shower and I got no clothes on, I kind of feel vulnerable. These wasps are coming around me. And I got real mad one day. And so I killed one. And then a second one came in the shower and I killed it. And I said out loud, why the heck are these wasps bothering me in the shower? And I'm pretty sure it was my guide speaking to me, because I don't think I would have made this up. And they said, well, why do you think they're coming in the shower? I said, I don't know. When I've got my clothes on out walking around, they're not coming next to me. And they said, well, what's in the shower? I said, just me and soap and water. And they said, and what's happening in Texas right now? Oh, there's a drought. Yeah, all the creeks have dried up. And they said, yeah, they were coming there out of desperation to drink the dirty bath water that you were throwing away, and you killed them for that. I felt terrible. It's not all fun being connected and being psychic. So some people are going to have a hard time with it. And so they choose not to connect to it, and that's okay.
Especially for sensitive people, right? So, and then when you have someone that is kind of saying, okay, like I really do want to connect with my loved one, and I've gone and I've seen all these mediums and they just won't come through. They won't ever speak to me. Is there a reason that people who have passed will just completely not send any messages? Or is it that we're just not aware?
That's a good question. I don't know. They might be busy doing other things, other tasks. So they might not be assigned as a helper, or the person might not be able to hear. The medium might not be good. But I mean, I have a friend who's a medium, so she can connect with almost any loved ones in heaven. Southern Belle medium, she's really good. And I've watched her in action, and she gives details that you can't fake those details. And so it just might be a matter of getting a better medium. But, speaking with those on the other side, we're kind of down here doing our own thing. And we're not supposed to be 100% connected to heaven and to those in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
But, you're going to see your loved ones again. Every person that's ever died, they're there. Mm-hmm. And I've heard the process. People arrive in heaven, oh my gosh, I saw my grandmother. And I mean, there's people that meet. One woman, she arrives and this little girl comes up to her. She gets to heaven. This little girl comes up and says, hi, mommy. And she says, no, sweetie, I'm sorry. I don't have any children. I'm not your mommy. And she says, yeah, you are. Yeah. I'm the child you aborted. And of course, this woman starts to cry because when she was a teenager, she had an abortion. And the little girl said, mommy, it's okay. I forgave you. And it's really nice up here. It's okay. You don't have to cry. Mm-hmm. So they even meet children they didn't know they had.
Yeah. Well, okay. So where can people find your book, David? How can they get in touch with you if they have had an NDE and are looking to get some help or counseling? Could you share that information? And then I will go ahead and repost in the comments and in the links, things like that. If you could just let them know how to find you.
Okay, sure. Thanks. I appreciate the plug. My website is godtookmyclothes.com. Mm-hmm. And there is a 2-chapter download to my book, so you can check it out and see if it's the kind of book you'd like to read before you pop $6 for the ebook, and I think the paperback is 13 or 14. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, all the major sites, and I think there's used ones on Abe Books that are cheaper. And there's also a link to my spiritual counseling.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the work that you're doing and continue to do. I think you're just helping so many people, even just putting a name to it for people that have had these experiences and they don't even know that there's a name. So
Hmm.
thank you. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you, Liz. It was a pleasure being on the show with you.
I hope to see you soon.